As cities fight obesity, more states are going to ban grocery taxes.
So the whole structure of how we're charged for our groceries by the state, at least, will change in an effort to combat the rising obesity epidemic.
Sure. So as cities fight obesity, you will not see any grocery taxes. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Knock-On Effect. This is where we start with the thing you know and end up in a strange place. I'm Justine Underhill, and joining us, as always, are raw and unsweetened Alex Rosenberg.
Sure, yeah, thank you, hi.
And we have the tasteful professor joining us from an undisclosed location, Roger Hurst.
Hi everyone, always a pleasure.
All right, so the professor and I, as always, will guide you from point A to point Z. This time it is from cities fighting obesity, which is actually a carryover from your knock-on effect the other week.
Where I talked about how increasing urbanization would lead to increasing obesity.
Yeah, so we're kind of following up on that. So it's extending that knock-on effect. And this gets us to states banning grocery taxes.
Okay.
You want to guess?
Interesting. Yeah, well, so you'd think you might want to make groceries more expensive rather than less expensive because I think the overall decline in food prices might have something to do with rise in obesity. I'm not sure. You know, I think that maybe grocery stores sell healthier items than what we call bodegas in New York or corner stores where you buy chips and stuff. And so groceries have more healthier and fresher items. And maybe people are gonna try to encourage people to buy those instead of stuff at corner stores, like bags of chips.
You were able to come up with a really thoughtful guess.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Well, okay.
It's totally wrong, but it's really thoughtful. So I give you credit for that.
All
okay.
Right.
This week we start with the obesity fight.
Which I'm waging myself on a personal level.
Every day?
Every day, yeah.
Well, let's start with, a lot of it starts with diet, as you mentioned, and let's start with what's in the typical grocery cart. So in a typical American's grocery cart, we have beef, we have chips, we have, some soda, we have milk. Here, if you want to straighten those out, bread, and we have cheese. Okay. So in terms of total dollar expenditures, do you want to put them in order?
Oh, lovely.
As to how much people are spending.
Okay. Just these exact items.
So these are the top 6 purchased items in the grocery store.
But
so put them in order.
Here's the thing, and I just want to ask one question.
Yeah.
This is very fancy bread.
It's representative.
And this is not fancy cheese.
It's overall bread spending for Americans.
Okay, and this represents what?
Bagged snacks. So I should be clear, this represents ground beef, this represents milk products, and this represents soda.
Okay, wow, here we go. All right, start with bagged snacks.
Okay, so those come over here.
And then I'm gonna go with soda. Milk, ground beef, and bread, and then I know we have a cheese crisis in America where not enough people are buying cheese, so I'm gonna put cheese last.
Okay, so
this is my guess.
I'm gonna reorder. So this is what it actually is. And this is according to data that was compiled by SNAP. So that's the Food Assistance Program. SNAP stands for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. That's basically food stamps. And so this is for all Americans, not just food stamp recipients, but it looks a little bit more like this. So we got soda, milk, give me the cheese.
Oh my God. Really?
Give me the bread.
Oh no.
Give me the beef. There you go. That's more what it looks like in that order. Soda spending is over $1.6 billion just on sodas. Milk comes close, milk products come close at 1.5.
So are these together in this?
No, cheese is separate.
Oh, separate, wow.
Now, when you widen the category to just sweetened beverages, so not just sodas, SNAP recipients spend about 10%. The average American household spends about 7%. Okay. So it's quite a lot of sugary soda spending. Now, I do want to take a quick aside here.
Yeah.
This is important. So, Professor, what do we know about what soda does to the body?
Well, it sort of maybe is the bleeding obvious, but studies have found that drinking 1 or 2 sugary drinks a day increases the risk of developing type 2 diabetes by 26% And after 6 months, daily consumption of sugary drinks increases fat deposits in the liver by 150%, leading directly to both type 2 diabetes and heart disease.
And so that brings us to our next point, which is the amount of sugar consumed. So in this, there are 77 grams of sugar. That's equivalent to this many teaspoons of sugar. Oof. Well, you just have 1 teaspoon now. That's quite a lot of sugar to consume. I mean, if you just drink 1 bottle, you don't even realize, like, chewing on all of these.
Right. I mean, it tastes like you're chewing on all this. I mean, I find, whatever, I don't have to get into my personal soda tastes, but yeah.
The big thing here, and let's move all these back a little bit,
Okay.
is the outcomes. This is not great for society. Health problems related to sugar and obesity are between $147 billion to nearly $200 billion per year. That's about 20% of annual medical spending in the US is related to obesity-related illnesses. And so, given all the health problems, a lot of states and cities don't necessarily want to be subsidizing a lot of these sugary drinks and snacks.
Well, also, I mean, so what's the purpose of SNAP? Like, isn't the purpose people who have trouble affording food, like letting them buy food so they can live off and feed their kids? Like,
right.
It seems like soda is very much like a luxury extra at best also, right?
Also,
like
soda is just sort of an unnecessary item. It's not something you need to consume at all.
Right.
It's just basically liquid sugar with no nutrients.
Yes.
Why are cities subsidizing purchases of sugar to the tune of $500 million per year on sugary drinks?
Right.
Why are we doing that? So, well, that was the first place to start, with a lot of cities saying, maybe we'll cut back on this. Maybe we'll try to limit our spending and try to limit what SNAP recipients receive in terms of that. And so Florida, Maine, New York, a bunch of states have tried and failed to do this. And it's actually very interesting because of some strange bedfellows. You have different groups actually aligning to prevent any sort of people stopping what SNAP recipients can receive. So it's basically the beverage industry, along with anti-hunger groups. So you have a lot of those on the left. Well, their arguments, I have them here. They say that it would limit choice for low-income Americans, and it would make it even more stigmatizing to participate in SNAP. It's already there's a stigma around it. And so if recipients can't purchase what they would normally purchase, they would make a stigma. And then on top of that, it would be an administrative nightmare for grocers to try to separate what's covered by SNAP and what's not. So those are...
Because basically the way it works is you just kind of buy anything in the grocery store, right?
Yeah.
Are there restrictions on what?
I mean, you're not buying cigarettes or alcohol or some of those things.
Sure.
But in terms
those are like taxed differently. So
right, exactly. So that's where it's like pretty much most things in the grocery store are applicable.
I guess I see it then.
Well, then there are other proposals that maybe just for SNAP recipients, you discount healthy food. So discount vegetables, give people 30% more purchasing power in terms of vegetables, and no extra purchasing power in terms of sodas. But then that didn't work. Actually, there was a whole kerfuffle to try to get that into the Farm Bill that just passed. And that failed. So there's sort of like, what's the next thing you can do? There's actually, rather than targeting SNAP recipients, if you want to deal with the negative externalities that soda and sugary drinks create, what's something you can do?
Well, you could you could regulate the amount of sugar in these drinks. I mean, this is poison. I mean, give me a break. So,
okay, that's one thing. I think something that's easier to do.
Or you could have an excise tax like we do for cigarettes.
Okay, taxation. Basically, you tax soda, sugary drinks. Basically, use that money to maybe fund nutrition programs or something else.
Sure.
Especially as we were talking about, these are a modifiable part of the diet. You don't necessarily need them, and so if you make them more expensive, that
you don't have to even learn new recipes. You know,
there's nothing that you're using unless you're making some I don't know. I'm sure they use soda in some recipes.
I think in like the South, there's like some recipes where you put a little Coca-Cola and like deep fry it. Does that sound right? I don't know.
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, you're not going to really...
My bubby made me the best matzo ball with Mountain Dew.
Ew. So this is some...
To change all the family recipes now.
Taxes are a certain way to improve awareness and maybe nudge people in the direction of drinking lower calorie or no calorie drinks. So better for everyone. Now, Professor, has there been much success on the tax front?
Well, there's been a reasonable amount of implementation. I think to date, something like 40 US counties and 7 cities, including Berkeley, San Francisco, Oakland, Boulder, Seattle, and Philadelphia. They've all implemented soda taxes, and more municipalities are looking into them and thinking about putting them on as well.
So what I want to do is go back to November of 2016, 2 years ago. It was a terrible...
I feel like something happened that month that I can't quite put my finger on.
Something else happened,
Yeah.
which was, it was a terrible month for the soda industry. Okay, so what happened?
Surprising. It seems like it might have been a good month for the soda industry.
It wasn't.
Okay.
So they burned nearly $25 million campaigning against taxation measures in California. And yet, voters in San Francisco, Oakland, and Albany all passed hefty taxes on sugary drinks. And so they didn't want to sit on their hands and wait. Big Soda plotted their revenge. And this year, Big Soda got its revenge.
Okay.
So over the summer, California Governor Jerry Brown signed into law a bill prohibiting all California counties and cities from enacting any new taxes on sugary beverages for the next 12 years.
Really? That doesn't seem very Jerry Brown of him.
Why? Why would he do such a thing?
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Okay, well, listen to this. The American Beverage Association, so that's the lobbying group for Coke, Pepsi, Snapple, and Dr. Pepper, they poured $7 million into something called the Tax Fairness, Transparency, and Accountability Act of 2018. So let's dig a little bit into that. What is this Transparency Tax Act?
A lot of abstract words in that one.
Okay. Basically, it was a ballot measure that would have made it way harder for cities or municipalities in California to raise taxes of any kind on anything. So new taxes and fees for
no taxation with representation?
Kind of. So they couldn't raise taxes for libraries, public safety, other government services, anything. And this was all being sponsored by the Beverage Association. So it triggered fears among local governments and unions that they might not be able to raise the revenue that they needed going forward. So there was this big hubbub, and the deal that was reached was that the beverage industry kindly dropped the initiative after lawmakers gave the state of California, they agreed to not raise taxes on sugary drinks.
This is so upsetting. It's so upsetting. It's like, so it's almost like the whole state's revenues were sort of held hostage. And give as cynical an answer as you like to this, but why would lawmakers agree to something that you can't raise taxes on anything because the beverage lobby said to?
Right.
So I mean, seriously, why would they do that?
This was something that was going to go onto the ballot. And so it was going to be brought to a vote for the entire state. And so lawmakers didn't even want that to go to a vote.
Right.
And so here's a quote. Here's how one senator described the situation to Kaiser Health News. So, quote, "The industry is aiming basically a nuclear weapon at the government in California and saying, if you do not do what we want, we are going to pull the trigger and you're not going to be able to fund basic government services." Said State Senator Scott Wiener, Democrat of San Francisco, "This is a pick your poison kind of situation, a Sophie's choice, if you will." That's crazy.
Well, I was with him on pick your poison. Sophie's choice.
A little bit, a little too far.
Yeah.
But it just shows you the level that the Beverage Association was willing to go to.
Right.
To defend, and this is really because a bunch of California cities started passing measures, and they said we need to shut this down.
I see. So it wasn't that the legislators said no more taxes. They were going to basically put in a big effort to have this referendum.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so and that was being funded by the Beverage Association. So that was going to go on the ballot in November, and so the only way to get them to stop and to withdraw it from the ballot was over the summer. They agreed to say, hey, we won't raise any more taxes. No municipality will raise taxes on sugary drinks or other grocery items. And now the strong arming that's going on isn't just located in the US. What do we have happening, Professor?
Yeah, it's going on in other places, and actually one of the neighbors doing it, Mexico, they instituted, I think it was the first national soda tax of its kind in 2014. But Mexico is Coca-Cola's biggest consumer market per capita consumption. And after the tax was passed in 2014, Coca-Cola pledged $8.2 billion worth of investments in Mexico through to 2020 to combat it.
All part of like an effort to try to, have leverage in Mexico. And actually, we ended up seeing headlines like this: government grade spyware hits Mexican advocates of soda tax. And so now those trying to pass the soda tax in Mexico, they were being harassed, they were being threatened, spied on. And it's not necessarily that Coca-Cola or other soda companies were doing this. It just shows you how incredibly important.
But they probably were.
I mean, or maybe people that, worked alongside the soda industry in some way. Well, it just shows like how much money is involved. There's so much at stake. People are willing to go to quite a lot of lengths to sort of get their way. And in some ways, this very much reminded me of big tobacco.
Yes.
So for example, the tobacco industry, also they spent decades funneling money into research that made cigarettes look a lot less harmful than it was. And guess what? We have the same thing going on today in terms of soda beverages. So we actually had a pretty big scandal that happened a few years ago. Professor, what was going on?
Our good friends Coca-Cola again spending $146 million on well-being related scientific research, partnership and health professional activities between 2010 and 2017, according to the company's own records. And a 2016 study found that Coca-Cola and PepsiCo funded 95 national medical organizations between 2011 and 2015, while lobbying against 29 public health bills that aim to reduce soda consumption or improve diet. So Coca-Cola funded also the publication of 389 articles in 169 journals between 2008 and 2016, according to a study published this year in the journal Public Health Nutrition, which is everyone's favorite magazine.
So basically, what I'm hearing is that it's very likely that sodas are even less healthy than those than you suggested at the beginning. That it's probably killing even more people than we think. There's all this fake controversy over how unhealthy it is just because of the industry itself paying for these studies to come out.
Right, so a lot of the medical studies themselves are skewed. And so
what's up with these doctors, by the way, taking money from Coca-Cola to do these studies? Is unbelievable.
A lot of the journals have now tried to distance themselves from Coca-Cola.
I mean, that's a violation of the Hippocratic Oath. I mean, they should be sued under HIPAA laws, in my opinion.
This became a pretty big deal. And so now, like, a lot of these journals that publish these papers, I mean, they are paying a price in some way. But yeah, it's sort of like these articles are still out there. A lot of this research is still out there. So it's still muddying the waters in some ways.
Yeah.
And this actually brings us back to the tax fight because the history of big tobacco might lead us in the right direction or figure out where we are headed, at least with big soda. I want to take a look at some of these commercials.
Oh no.
It's election time, and there's a lot in your voter guide. It's simple. Voting yes prohibits politicians from taxing any food or beverages and protects families struggling with the high cost of living.
I've just had a long day of farming Mountain Dew out there, and one of my Coca-Cola cows is sick, so I had to tend to her. It's been a rough day for this farmer.
I want to show you the other one that I just thought was ridiculous.
There you go.
We need to eat to survive. And if we have to cut back on what we eat, that's not going to be good, especially for the elderly. They're penny pinching already, and they're going to have to cut out special nutrients.
What? They have to cut out on special nutrients? Also, was that the best take they got, by the way?
I guess so. What's crazy?
How many shakes do you think they had?
She has a watermelon in her cart, first of all.
And very green bananas.
And what she said, quote, "We need to eat to survive, and if we have to cut back on what we eat, that's not going to be good, especially for the elderly." Does that sound like it has anything to do with soda? Does that sound like soda's involved at all?
No, because you don't eat soda.
Right, okay, so...
Except in my Bobby's famous matzo ball soup recipe.
I can't wait to try that someday. Now, those are both commercials that were paid for by the soda industry.
Oh my God, I can't believe it.
Okay, so this was part of a campaign in Washington State called the Yes to Affordable Groceries. which is what they were marketing at us. So now soda companies used their war chest to fund measures in Washington and Oregon for this past election season that would ban any cities within the state from raising taxes on groceries. And so this is what we have. So in Washington state, they spent over $22 million. That's how much was spent for the initiative. Against the initiative was $33,000. Very little spent against it, but for the $22 million that was spent for the measure, let's see, Coca-Cola spent $10 million.
Yeah.
Pepsi spent almost $8 million.
Right.
Keurig Dr. Pepper spent about $2 million. Dr. Pepper Snapple spent about $1 million.
Yeah.
And then Red Bull spent about $250,000.
It's a little lame. Come on,
I
Red
know.
Bull, step
Come
it up.
on, come on. What are they doing?
Where are your wings?
So what's crazy,
Yeah.
for the $22 million that was spent to say yes to affordable groceries in Washington, it was all beverage companies.
Right.
It was all soda companies. There's no like hiding behind this. But what's crazy is that it passed. It's $22 million. I was talking to my uncle who lives in Washington State. He got dozens of mailers. There's nothing combating it on the other side in terms of, who's gonna say like, raise taxes on soda, or like this is really about soda tax. There's very little effort to combat it. And so, of course, it passed. And so now no municipalities or cities in Washington state can raise taxes on any groceries. No one was even threatening them to say we're gonna raise taxes on groceries. That wasn't even part of the question. This really was all about soda. And so that's where it passed. And this is something, taking a look at what was happening with big tobacco, a very similar story, which was specifically that they used their lobbying clout to persuade state lawmakers to block cities and counties, so using the states to block cities and counties from passing smoke-free ordinances.
Right.
And so that was basically using state power to block anything that was going on at the local level. And so by 2006, 21 states had preempted local smoke-free laws. That's according to Americans for Non-Smokers' Rights. And even today, 13 states have some sort of ban on local smoke-free laws. And so it's still lasting today, even when it's like crazy to think about blocking a city's ability to have any sort of smoke-free law. So using that as an example, as cities take up the fight against obesity, more states are likely going to crack down on grocery taxes. And that gets us to our destination.
God, that was a grim one. That was
Yeah.
a dark,
Yeah.
grim knock on effects.
Well, thank you.
Left me
It's
angry
My specialty.
and a
Well,
little parched.
Yeah. Do you want to try some soda?
Oh, I haven't drank one of those in decades.
Just to put a little fine point on this, it was very strategic of them to go after the West Coast. So to go after states like California, Oregon, Washington, specifically because that's where a lot of the grassroots movements were cropping up. And so by basically coming down on the state level and saying you're not going to be able to pass any local ordinances, that has basically stifled the grassroots movements in those areas. So that's where we're left.
I will say, here's what I would say, is that I know there are people who will be against soda taxes because of quote unquote nanny state concerns of government like telling people what to do.
There are externalities though.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's sort of like, it's unfair to say like, oh, I'm gonna drink this and then I'm gonna rely on whatever healthcare or whatever, other externalized costs
especially
there
if you
are.
don't even have the money to buy food. I mean, let's be honest.
So then that's even just getting into SNAP recipients. But I mean, in general, I think that I personally believe that there should be some sort of tax because that would help incorporate all these externalities that the soda makers aren't incorporating it into their prices.
Yes, and I can be on board with that. I mean, I will say the real problem is a lack of education about health. Like there's no, at least when I was in school, they didn't tell us anything about what to eat, what not to eat. Since there's no education, it leaves open the door for soda companies to come in and rearrange people's way of thinking and with TV commercials and all that sort of thing. But it's only because people don't have a strong base about it. And so it would be good, I agree with you, that to combat the externality, soda should cost more so people are basically paying for the health care that the state is later going to have to provide them.
Right.
At the same point, it'd be good if it wasn't a battle between companies and governments. Like it would be a better world which people simply were educated and able to make healthier
But
decisions.
then it's like, how do you become more educated when all the studies are skewed in one direction?
Right.
You have a tipping point where everything's against you. And so in that way, it's like maybe with the cigarette industry, we did see the tide start to turn in terms of tobacco. And so
but I think that tide turned socially. I think it was a social thing more than anything else. And I would advise people, if you actually think this is an issue, not to make this a campaign commercial, I'm a farmer, and this, pushing around my cart of unripe
bananas.
But I think that just as people, the tide turned. So smoking was cool, and nothing could dissuade people from not smoking if it's cool. And now it's not cool, so it's like not cool to smoke. So like if you spend a lot of time with people and you smoke, people will kind of ostracize you. I think that we should start ostracizing people who drink soda. I do, I really do. Yeah. I don't think we should ostracize people based on their weight or anything else, but I think when we see people making those healthy decisions, we should tisk.
Not cool.
I think we should tisk. I really do. I think that's how the world changes. I think it changes socially. It changes through media, and smoking is now like a thing that bad guys do instead of heroes. I don't know.
Well, Professor, I'd be curious as to your thoughts on all this.
It's kind of, it's another of these sort of the lobbyists win over the politicians with cash so that the corporates get the upper hand over the consumer shock once again. I mean, it seems to happen in so many walks of life that it's a recurring thing. And in some ways, maybe the issue here is the whole lobbyist kind of opportunity and movement that drives a lot of American politics. That's the bit that needs the scrutiny rather than the consumer choice, which ultimately should be allowed.
Well, listen, do we need some Brit coming in here? No, I agree with you, Roger.
I think it's reform the entire system.
Yeah.
I think that's where.
I think that we always end with that, don't we?
Yeah, we do always end with reform the blockchain, but that one's not as applicable.
Not gonna help.
All right.
This is the original blockchain.
Sugar cubes?
Yeah, blocks of sugar.
Okay, we're gonna leave it there. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us on this week's Knock-On Effect. We hope to see you every week on Thursday at realvision.com/knockoneffect.
And if I offended any soda drinkers, good. You can sign up for your 14-day free trial at realvision.com/knockoneffect.
I just said that.
You just said that. All right, bye.
See you guys next week. Okay, I just want me to take some sugar.
Oh, God.
I can't eat it.
That sounds disgusting.
What do I do with that?